Good evening. Board of Commissioners would like to welcome you to this meeting tonight. Welcome to local government. We're really glad to see a room full of people tonight. Thank you for coming. We have a long meeting. We ask each of you to stay with us as long as you can tonight and just enjoy yourself. Again, welcome to local government. Okay, thank you for coming. We will stand at this time for the pledge and invocation. We'd like the pastor to come and do our invocation. That Commissioner Song. Let's all stand and join together.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, we want to just say thank you for allowing us to come together. Lord, let everything we do tonight be to your will and to your glory. We ask that you guide the mind of our leadership, Lord. Guide the mind of our citizens. Let us just stay focused on you. That every decision that we make, Lord, be in your best interest, Lord. Be guided by your ways and your thoughts. This is our home of prayer. In the name of the Father, in the name of the Son, in the name of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Again, welcome to Hope County. Welcome to local government. Thank you for the pastor. As we move on tonight, we have a few changes we need to add and take off to make the meeting a bit shorter, a little bit longer, and some areas. Mr. Attorney, you have anything that you wish to report?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if you would table item 6B until the next meeting, please.
Table 6B the next meeting. Okay. We also would like to table number 11. Number 11, let's table it tonight also. And also we'll take number 9 and make it number 2, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Sure.
Are there any other changes?
I need to add a proclamation for the board for Parks and Rec and Polk County School staff. My Parks and Rec director and Mr. Fred Clark, and with the help of Vice Chairman Sutherland, put together, and they'll discuss it. If we can add that as item 9.
Well, taking off these foot, no. All those items we asked to add and take off. Her motion approved those. That's second motion. Second, all in favor with aye. Opposed? I have it. Now there are her motion to adopt.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
there's a second before they say in Texas to another step further.
Okay.
You're moving item number 9 to number 2, but you're not taking item number 2 off the agenda.
No, sir.
Okay.
Two people. They just yeah.
I just want to make that clear to everybody.
Yeah.
You're fine.
Use it. Yeah.
You're fine.
I have motion to adopt.
So,
That's second. Motion second, all in favor with aye. Opposed, I have it. That's it. Okay, item 2 tonight will be Sand Hill Center. She please come. If Big George has some miles to travel, we're gonna try to get back home safe before it all.
Ms. Victoria, you can thank your board member, Mr. Sutherland, for advocating real hard for you.
Well, I appreciate that, and I always thank Commissioner Sutherland. And I'd like to start off by, after reminding you, I think I know everybody who I am. I'm Victoria Witt. I'm the CEO of Sand Hill Center. I'm here tonight to present to you the Sand Hill Center County General Funding Request. Your county manager, I believe, already has that. That should be in your packet. I'll be very brief and go over that with you. But I would first like to recognize and thank Commissioner Sutherland, who is the Hope County representative on the Sand Hill Center board. I'm also pleased that Shirley Hart, who many of you know, I'm sure everybody knows Shirley Hart. She is also the Sand Hill Center Hope County representative, and I'm happy to see former Commissioner Jean Powell here, and she served prior to Commissioner Sutherland. So I feel really at home. I feel like I'm having a board meeting or something. Our request tonight is the same request that it has been for the past 13 years. Our board met on March 14th and made the decision once again to not request any additional funding from any of our counties. So the Hope County request is the $58,000 that you have been generous enough over the past years to provide to us. I would like to remind you that that funding stays right here in Hope County. It goes to the support of the Crisis Walk-In Center over on Elwood Avenue. I would also call your attention to a dashboard that we provided you showing the number of people that are served so you can see where your funding is going to. You also have 2 reports in your packet. I will not go through them tonight with you. Hopefully you'll have time in your leisure to review them. It is our annual report and our quarterly report, and it gives you highlights as far as what is going on at Sand Hill Center. Would also like to call your attention that the last time I was here, since then, we have partnered with your health department and we have partnered with the DSS here to provide funding for guardianship services and also to co-locate a therapist at the health department. So both of those projects are going really well. We will continue to meet with your county manager and your and Commissioner Sutherland to identify other areas of need in Hope County that we can assist with. So I will stop there. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have about our funding request for about Sand Hill Center.
Any questions from the board?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a couple comments if Ms. Whitaker help me. Could you tell us how many counties that we were over at Sand Hill may have and then our funding, our annual budget?
Okay, Sand Hill Center, we cover 9 counties, and you may remember that the last county that we added was Guilford County. You'll remember that when the state redid how Medicaid funding was allotted, that Guilford County joined us. Our budget is $310 million. The majority of that is Medicaid funding. We are the Medicaid pass-through for the state for behavioral health services.
Mr. Chairman, I serve on that board with Ms. Whitaker. She's our Chief Executive Officer. She's doing an outstanding job. I want the board to hear the type of work that she's doing, and with her help and her assistant and Shirley Hart, we were able to add more services, and we did not increase our funding of $58,000. So I ask that the board at whatever time necessary to approve the recommendation of this bill.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have
Ms. Whitaker.
a safe trip back. Be
Thanks.
careful out there.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. 2, Austin Ruth and Shirley. Thank you, Shirley. You ready? You're going back originally. Number 2. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of County Commissioners. My name is Jonathan Charleston, and I'm with the Charleston group. I have here tonight with me Scott McKay, who is a senior partner with Cherry Becker. Also have with me tonight former members of the State Bureau of Investigation who have assisted us in connection with the investigation into overtime irregularities in Hope County.
Mr. Charles, we have seats for Mr. East and Mr. Powers. They want to come and sit down. You want to bring them in the room? We got some time. Let me start your presentation.
Take my seat too.
You good?
You good?
Okay.
Yeah, you good.
First, I'd like to start out by reporting back to the county that pursuant to your instructions, we have attempted to be very thorough and transparent in our dealings in connection with this investigation. We spent the last few hours this afternoon, along with your county attorney, meeting with the district attorney, Christy Newton, and the SBI agent in charge of this investigation, A.Z. Williams, along with Rufus Williams with the SBI from Charlotte. The whole idea was, with the consent of this Board of Commissioners and the direction of the Board of Commissioners, to brief the district attorney on the results of our investigation thus far. I might add that there is still some work to be done to complete the verifications, and that's based on the fact that we do not have all of the information that was necessary to review from the Hope County Sheriff's Office, and we've explained that to you in prior meetings. Among other things, we'll point out that in our discussions with the district attorney has agreed to broaden her review and investigation based on the information that we provided regarding overtime irregularities in the Sheriff's Department. It doesn't mean that there necessarily was wrongdoing of any sort, but what Scott McKay will point out to you is that there are significant irregularities in overtime in the Sheriff's Department that we believe require some explanation. That was one of the reasons we tried to have the appropriate level of cooperation with the Sheriff's Department, so we could have had some of those answers for this Board of County Commissioners tonight. I thought it was important to give a little background on what brought us here. So if you'll indulge me for a second, you may recall on February 20th of this year, the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation obtained a search warrant relating to the SBI's investigation of potential payroll irregularities. And that search warrant was executed on a Monday night, 2 hours before a county commissioner meeting here in Hope County. Now, the information that was sought, according to reports, of course, we've not been able to substantiate that because we've not had any conversations with the Sheriff's Department, but it was based on what we understand to have been investigation by the Sheriff's Department that had been ongoing for some period of time. What we do know is that there had been no inquiry at all for records of any sort or any cooperation sought from Hope County prior to the execution of a search warrant, which we later determined was targeted at 2 individuals, one of whom was an employee of the Sheriff's Department, and the other person whom is a former employee of the county. Now, after the search warrant was executed, there are a number of statements made in various media which suggested that this investigation was a very serious investigation. There was a quote in the Fayetteville Observer, which has been attributed to the sheriff, that says, "This investigation is serious. An investigation of this magnitude can go from 0 to 60, and I'm not talking about speed." That statement was attributed to the sheriff. This could net way more than 5 people. Not all of this is around timesheets. Now, I might also point out to you that the reason the SBI was brought into this investigation, we're told, because we've not been able to verify this, but we understand it was because the wrongdoers, or the investigation itself, involved employees of the Sheriff's Department. And so we've always thought it was interesting that throughout the investigation, we've had very little contact with the SBI, and most of our contact has in fact been with the Sheriff's Department, to the extent we have sought to obtain the records necessary for Chair Director to do their work. You may recall thereafter, on February the 23rd of 2017, the Board of Commissioners adopted a resolution authorizing the county manager to engage 1 or more firms to support the county staff in reviewing the county's internal controls and anti-fraud practices to investigate allegations of impropriety involving the county, to identify deficiencies in internal controls that might be material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, and other matters relating to the SBI's pending investigation. As part of that internal investigation, which Scott McKay will get into a little bit more, but an internal investigation is one of the first things that an organization does when there's been some irregularities or improprieties either alleged or detected. Many of you see it happen time and again, and Mr. McKay and myself have been involved in investigations involving local governments around this state. But one of the first things you do is you conduct an internal investigation. And so as a result of that, the county engaged my law firm, Charleston Group, and the public accounting firm of Cherry Beckett in its Raleigh office. And as I mentioned to you before, our respective firms have been involved in a number of investigations together, and we bring a wealth of experience in these type of matters. Leading Cherry Beckett's work in this matter, as I mentioned before, is Scott McKay, who will present as soon as I sit down, and also Michael East, who retired from the SBI as the special agent in charge of the Financial Crimes Unit after 28 years of service. Mr. East retired about 15 months ago from the SBI, and also William Rusty Pounds, who's also a former SBI agent in the Financial Crime Unit and also the Public Corruption Unit of the SBI. These two men together have substantial experience in the state of North Carolina working with the SBI and in combination with other law enforcement agencies in investigating financial crimes involving local governments and other entities. After the search warrant was issued against the county and our law firm and Cherry Beckett were engaged, numerous attempts were made to engage with local government here, local law enforcement here, to obtain necessary records in order to carry out the investigation that we had been engaged to perform. That was necessary because in order for Cherry Beckett to carry out the various analytics and other investigative techniques necessary to get to the bottom of what had been alleged, Cherry Beckett required access to certain critical records and information maintained within the possession of either the FBI or the sheriff's office. Without the requested information, Cherry Beckett's analytics and forensic procedures will be more limited in scope due to the lack of access to the information we spoke to. And as I mentioned to you earlier, there is still some information that we require, but we've yet to receive from the SBI and also from the local sheriff's department. After various inquiries and engaging in various discussions with the district attorney, she agreed to release to the county a copy of those files that had been seized pursuant to the search warrant in lieu of court intervention. I might say that there was a report in both the federal newspaper and the local newspaper that a judge had denied the county's request to receive access to the sheriff's documents. I think it's important to clarify exactly what occurred. On March 14th, the county served its emergency petition for return of seized property. Under the North Carolina General Statute, any party that has property that has been seized pursuant to a lawful investigation has a right to petition to receive that property back. In this case, the county had a right to petition for the return of the 18 files that had been seized, along with some of the other files and information that had been seized. Simply put, the law says you can do it. After we served the emergency petition, it was at that point that the information was turned over to us by the district attorney. So I want to be clear. I'll make this perfectly clear. The emergency petition for return of seized property that was filed on behalf of the county was in connection with the county's attempt to obtain the 18 files and other information that had been seized. The county knew under the law that it was entitled to receive that information. In addition, the county requested that the sheriff's department release the timesheets. Now we know that the timesheets had not been seized. But we thought that there might be a reasonable opportunity to receive those timesheets at that time. So we believe that the judge ruled properly that the timesheets had not been seized, and therefore the statute that we were seeking to obtain that information under was not appropriate. So we understood.
And so, Attorney Charleston, what we requested, we received.
That's correct.
And what we did was we wanted to try to see what, if we could get additional information while we were there.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. Thank you, Commissioner. I might also add that another significant date was April 17th of 2017. After numerous discussions with the county, the North Carolina Local Government Commission's Director of Fiscal Management met with Hope County to discuss, among other things, the implications of the ongoing investigation by the SBI. One thing that we have to point out, and I think there was a very smart letter to the editor in the paper by I think his name was Ralph Huff, that wrote a very smart letter to the editor that said simply, the county's annual audit, that's an audit that all local governments or units of local government are required to submit annually to a local government commission pursuant to General Statute 159, that the county's annual audit couldn't be completed. And here's why. Once the investigation began, the auditing firm, the external auditors, and these auditors are not employees of the county, they're independent auditors, were concerned as to whether or not they could sign off on an audit because of the pending investigation. More importantly, because they didn't understand the scope and extent of what was going on, particularly since some of the earlier comments had been that this was going to be something very serious and very impactful to the county. Consequently, your external auditors haven't signed off on your annual audit that's required. Therefore, it's late. And I think we'll point out it has been late in previous years, but I think when the Ms. Edmondson came down from the North Carolina Local Government Commission, she pointed out that significant progress had been made by the county in connection with addressing financial considerations. But having said that, the audit is late, the audit is still incomplete, and as a consequence, it is my understanding that the county is not able to borrow money and do other financial activities that most local governments can engage in until that box is checked. So I wanted to make sure that that we pointed that out as part of the chronology. After it became apparent that the timesheets that were necessary to Cherry Becker's evaluation were not going to be forthcoming, the Board of County Commissioners, pursuant to statute, requested that the sheriff prepare a special report for submission to the Board of Commissioners within 14 days. While that report was in fact responded to by the sheriff, it contained no information that could further the work of Cherry Becker that had been engaged by the county to get to the bottom of all of the allegations regarding financial impropriety in the human resources function. Today, we have yet to receive the timesheets that have been requested, and therefore the report that will be provided to you this evening is captioned as an update, a public update regarding the internal review of payroll activities involving the Hope County and Sheriff's Office. And it's important to point these out because initially, when the search warrant was executed, the search warrant was executed only against Hope County. And there were a number of allegations raised during the course of that, which involved, among other things, that this matter could involve elected officials. We've later learned, at least through published statements that are attributed to the sheriff, that the allegations involving this unfortunate set of circumstances are limited to 2 individuals. We believe that beyond those 2 individuals, there are other individuals in the sheriff's department that must be looked at. And we have requested that the district attorney and the SBI take a look at those individuals. And the district attorney, who we met with today for at least 2 hours, has indicated to us that she will take a look at that. As I mentioned before, our review is based on information available to us. And just because an investigation has been expanded does not mean that there's impropriety. It simply means that there are some irregularities that require someone to look into.
Mr. Charles, if I can stop for a moment, I need a point of clarity in regards to what you just said. You indicated that we knew the sheriff made some morally wrong statements. We know that's for a fact. And now he said that potentially some elected officials could have been involved. So while you're saying that we know now, based on your investigation, that has been narrowed down from the sheriff's statement to 2 people, one from HR and one from this department.
Well, Commissioner Sutherland, I think the statement as to whether or not the investigation could involve elected officials was attributed to Ronnie Mitchell, who is the sheriff's attorney for Cumberland County. I don't believe the sheriff suggested that, although in the sheriff's initial statements, he said that this matter could be a very large and very serious matter.
Well, this is important because of the fact that the cloud is behind the whole county. We need to get that cloud to move away. So we need to know the facts. What is the facts? We understand that Ronnie Mitchell is the county attorney for Cumberland, but with the sheriff's department, but also he represented the sheriff on some independent matters here, including the hearing that you just mentioned. So what's the response to the allegation about some elected officials have been or will be or accused of any wrongdoing? Where is that?
I think the response is we've not looked into that, and I don't believe the investigation is headed in that direction. I will say to Ronnie Mitchell's, not to his defense, but as a point of clarification, it's my understanding that Mr. Mitchell was misquoted by the Fayetteville Observer. And in fact, what he said is that this matter could or could not involve the elected officials. And I think when the paper initially ran that story, it suggested that the elected officials were being investigated. I think the Fayetteville Observer did a great job in trying to correct that and clarify that statement.
Okay, thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, at this point, what I'd like to do is to ask Scott McKay to come forward and to make the preliminary update on the findings of our internal investigation.
Thank you. Again, my name is Scott McCann. I'm a partner with Sherry Beckford. I'm going to give you a public update regarding the internal review that we started on behalf of Polk County and working through the law firm of Charleston Group to look at payroll activities through the county and the sheriff's operation. First, I want to put a public disclaimer out there that the information in the public update is being disclosed pursuant to authorization from the Charleston Group, the law firm that we're working under, and Polk County. A little history on our firm, for those that don't know. Sherry Beckford is the 2nd largest public accounting firm in the Southeast region and the 25th largest public accounting firm in the United States. We were founded 70 years ago. We have over 1,000 plus professional employees. We generate about $170 million in professional service fees annually. We have 22 offices in 6 states. I would say we have a large government services practice and a large risk advisory practice that provides audit and consulting services just in the state of North Carolina to 8 of the top 10 local governments in North Carolina. We also provide consulting and advisory services to many of the large state departments and to the North Carolina office of the state auditor. The Firm also has a large, dedicated and well-respected litigation support and fraud and forensics practice that comprised of about 60 individuals that are focused on these areas. The firm engagement team members are myself. I am a partner with Cherry Beckert. I am a certified public accountant in California. In North Carolina, I'm a certified fraud examiner. I'm a certified internal auditor. I'm also a former accountant, actually, in accounting. I was a global corporate controller for a large multi-billion-dollar multinational publicly traded company and oversaw all financial operations, including SEC reporting, payroll operations, etc. I want to point out the other team members that Mr. Charleston pointed out. Mike East, who's the former head of the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation's Financial Crimes Unit, has been with our firm for about a year and a half, a little bit longer, I believe. And the other team member, Mr. Rusty Pounds, who's a manager and a certified fraud examiner, and was a former special agent of the SBI. Absolutely. Absolutely. Mike, would you stand up? Rusty, would you stand up? So Mike and Rusty were the lead investigative agents serving the county in these matters. But what's not said is there's 8 other professionals behind the scene made up of statisticians, data analysis, forensic technologists, people that operate complex softwares, which you'll see tonight, to help us visualize the data in the county and determine where the outliers might lie. So we had about 8 other professionals involved in this deal. Thanks, Rusty. I have a table of contents. I won't go through each one, but we have sections of the presentation we want to discuss. I remember making this statement earlier, and I think it's important to set everyone's expectations. The responsibility for an internal review or an internal investigation is the responsibility of the organization. All organizations have an anti-fraud program of controls, including the following elements. 1, they're responsible for corporate governance, including written policies. That's the responsibility of the organization, including the county. They're responsible to do a fraud risk assessment. And the reason they do one is so they can determine what the other anti-fraud control elements they need to be in place. Those would be preventative controls to timely prevent fraud and misuse. Detective controls to timely detect fraud and abuse. And then the last one, of which we are in process now, is the reporting process and the coordinated approach to internal investigations and corrective action. Those are the 5 elements required in any anti-fraud program controls for every organization. And I would say that this isn't Cherry Beckert just saying this. This is the professionals that constitute the governing bodies that give us our standards and rules to operate under. Those would be the Institute of Internal Auditors, the American Institute of CPAs, Certified Public Accountants, and the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners all compiled this document. By the way, this is available to the public. It's free, and everybody can look at this and review it for themselves and do a health checkup on their own organization. Mr. Charleston summarized the timeline of events very well, but I will tell you in our initial discovery, that's what we were brought into. We understand the search warrant was served around February 20th. We read various media reports as part of our general information gathering activities to determine whether or not there was a focus area that we could focus on. We understand that a certain deputy was terminated on or about February 21st, and shortly thereafter, one of the county employees responsible for human resource administration and payroll administration resigned. We are aware the Board of Commissioners adopted a resolution on the 22nd to authorize the county manager to engage firms, outside firms. And on February 24th, the Charleston group was engaged and subsequently engaged us as part of the internal review team in these matters. Our scope indeed is limited. It is focused on limited internal review procedures to assist the county with its internal review. Again, it is a coordinated approach with the county, with the law firm, and ourselves. The scope of our procedures is specific to all county and sheriff office employees with overtime hours. Only employees with overtime hours. Once we completed our initial discovery procedures, we mutually agreed to focus on employees with overtime hours incurred in excess of 300 hours per year. And that will hopefully become clear to everyone as we go through the presentation. We did have some scope limitations that I want to call out. We were unable to conduct interviews or perform what we would consider sufficient information gathering activities with the following individuals. And the reason we do that is to understand the scope and the collective knowledge of what might be available so that we can focus our procedures. Those individuals were the sheriff. We were unable to coordinate or gather information with the sheriff. One of the captains, Mr. Tim Rudd, and then partially because of their nature, I think the special agent in charge of this investigation was Adrian Williams with the State Bureau of Investigation. Typically, we will coordinate with the SBI or other law enforcement agencies in internal review activities to share with them on their ongoing investigations. That's a typical practice.
Will you mic up a little closer to you? That's what.
Is this better?
Yeah, they might hear you better.
Okay, perfect. We have some additional scope limitations. We are unable to obtain from the sheriff's office copies of the original timesheets to determine if disparities existed between the original timesheet copies, copies of the original timesheets and the originals retained by the county. We are unable to verify the number of sheriff's signature stamps maintained by the sheriff's office. We are unable to walk through and understand the internal controls over the sheriff's employee timekeeping system, including controls over safeguarding signature stamps, controls over employees with access and authority to use the sheriff's signature stamp by delegation. And we're unable to obtain a current organization chart at the sheriff's office, and therefore we're unable to determine with any certainty which sheriff's officers, supervisors were designated to review and approve employee timesheets and use the sheriff's signature stamp. We consider these scope limitations in our internal review. I want to educate the commissioners around the timekeeping systems so that the rest of the presentation will hopefully become more obvious. The county uses an electronic timekeeping system called Time Clock. It's used to enter, record, and approve employee time electronically, and then ultimately to support information that's fed to the financial system of the county, Munis, in order to process a given employee's payroll. It's an electronic system. The sheriff's office uses a manual or paper-based system to record all the sheriff's office employee time. We understand that manual timesheets are prepared by the sheriff's office employees, reviewed and approved by sheriff's office supervisors, and then the sheriff Hugh Ray Peterkin's signature stamp is applied to the employee timesheet to authorize the employee's time, including any overtime.
So this is a manual system that you use.
Yes, sir, Commissioner. I'll give you an example of what that looks like shortly and walk you through how their system works. The manual timesheets produced by the sheriff's office are then carried to the county's offices for review and entry into the county's financial system, which I mentioned earlier was used. It's an important note, I think, to the commissioners that it's our understanding the original timesheets are retained by the county's Human Resources Department, and copies of the originals are maintained by the sheriff's office. So in our procedures, we look at the original timesheets. We understand that the Sheriff's Detention Center previously used the electronic timekeeping system for the county. From about October 2010 to February 2013, when the sheriff notified the county manager and the human resources manager at the time that the time clock system, the electronic system, wouldn't work for the sheriff's operations in the detention center, and it didn't work for it. The sheriff's office. The deputies were never in the electronic timekeeping system. I have an example of that email. I'll pause and let the commissioners read the email from the sheriff to withdraw or not use the electronic timekeeping system. There is sufficient time to look at that all. So this, I want to take my time and explain the manual timekeeping system to the commissioners We have whited out or blocked the employee's name and the employee's number to protect the identity of the individual employee. But this would be a typical timesheet, which is manual. It looks like it was constructed in a Excel type program, a desktop program, and then it's filled out, typed in for what the times are. To walk you through this one, I've highlighted the overtime hours, which is about 13.75 hours in this particular time card, are recorded. The next important box is down below, and I know you might not be able to read this, but this is a justification for overtime. This area of the timesheet should spell out the dates that were worked, overtime was incurred, and the reasons for the overtime. An important control point in any timekeeping system. Then, on the left-hand lower side of the screen, the employee signature is applied manually to the time card, timesheet. And then the supervisor signs below the employee both date, the timesheet. The next step is the Sheriff Peterkin's signature stamp, as you can see in the lower left-hand bottom part of the timesheet, is applied to the timesheet and dated. If you'll notice, I just circled right after the sheriff's signature stamp, there are some initials. We would typically expect to see these, and those initials, we believe, would represent whoever was delegated by the sheriff, one of the supervisors or managing members of the sheriff's office or detention center, that would be authorized to stamp or use the sheriff's stamp to approve the time card as is delegated to that individual. This we would expect to see on most of the time cards. The last step is after the time card is taken over to the county's offices. There is a date stamp in the upper right-hand corner with someone's initials, the word entered, and the date that this timesheet was recorded into the county's financial systems. So all the control elements that we would expect to see in a timekeeping system appear to be evidenced on this manual timesheet. As Jonathan mentioned, we ran a series of data analytics. So all the data for all the overtime, for all the county and all the sheriff is maintained in the county's financial systems. And I mentioned we have a lot of staff that specialize behind the scenes in crunching the numbers, if you will, extracting data, putting it into actual insights, visualizing the data using specialized tools and software, which we'll review in a moment. In our overall basic overview of the overtime, we noted that there were some irregularities, what we would consider to be irregularities in the overtime in various departments of the sheriff and the county. The red box represents the sheriff's office. This is 2012, 2013, 2014, and the little looks like pie charts would represent the percentage of overtime for each department, whether it's the sheriff's office, the detention center, which is blue, the communications department, which is green, and I believe that is the 911 call center, which is a part of the county's operations. And the taupe or tan, a little slice of the pie chart, represents all the other departments within the county and their respective percentage of overtime of all the overtime consumed by the county and the sheriff's operations. And so we ran these basic analytics on the initial time from fiscal 2012 to fiscal 2016, and that's from July to June 30th the following year. I'm going to show on the following slide the data behind those percentages of overtime so that this may be clear to the commissioners. Again, we've got our nomenclature with the red box being the sheriff's office, the blue, the detention center, green communications, and the gray or tan top-colored others. The pie chart legend is the sheriff's office over the years of 2012 to 2016 represents approximately 120 employees. The detention center is approximately 170 employees. The communications department or 911 call center is approximately 20 employees. And other represents approximately 300 employees, comprising all the other departments of the county. So there are approximately 600 employees every year throughout the county that would be potentially subject to receive overtime. That would be our population. In the sheriff's office and detention center, just at a high level, those pie charts, we noted that between 2012 and 2016, between the sheriff's office and the detention center, they represent approximately 80 to 90% of all the overtime that's paid by the county. By year, that breaks down from 83, 87, 88, 87% from 2012 to 2016. So again, on average, 80 to 90% of all overtime.
For the whole county.
For the whole county, yes, sir. In the detention center, we did notice something that was a bit irregular, and that is the percentages of overtime in the detention center from 2012 to 2016 appear to have increased as a percentage from 28% to 51% in 2015 and 16, which we consider significant in terms of overtime percentage. The next analytics that I'm going to show you are going to detail the actual departments by year and the relationship of the overtime by employee so that we can start to stratify and classify the population so that a reasonable person could discern where the outliers are for overtime in the population. This is what's called a scatter plot, and I'll explain it. This is for the fiscal year 2016, and this is the sheriff's office. On the left-hand side of the screen, we have overtime hours from 0 to 1,000. The left-hand side of the vertical axis is the hours of overtime. On the lower axis, the bottom horizontal axis, we have the percentage of overtime pay compared to the regular pay of the employee. In other words, of the pay that they receive, what was the percentage of overtime pay, not hours, compared to their regular pay? So to classify this scatter plot into the population of employees, there's a blue box I've outlined in the lower left-hand corner depicting the vast majority of employees in the sheriff's office for the fiscal year 2016 who received somewhere less than 200 hours of overtime or less than 10% of the pay that they earn. We would consider this as nominal, reasonable. That wouldn't cause us to raise our eye. In the orange box that I've outlined on the scatter plot, we have another population of employees that receive more than 200 hours of overtime, but less than 400 hours, and it's a much smaller population. That we consider to be high overtime based on the relationship to the rest of the employee population. And so at this point in time, to make it a baseline, we established that 300 hours or more of overtime would be a consistent baseline that we would use, as I mentioned earlier in the slides, as employees that we would look at analytically and or examine their time flows. Anything above 400 hours, we drew a red line and said, if it's more than 400 hours of overtime, it's potentially irregular and it's a much smaller population. You will notice there are other employees who are below the red line or 400 hours of overtime in a given year that are represented by diamonds or circles where their pay in overtime appears to be a greater percentage than their regular pay. We would also consider these to be unusual and given these to the county to look at to determine if there's any irregularities in that population. There could be a reasonable answer to that. Could be part-time employees that they just needed to work for more overtime, but in relation to their regular pay, some of them appear to have a high amount of their pay as overtime. I'm going to circle the red triangles, which we consider to be irregular, and not to get too technical, but our technicians would say they are 1.5 times standard deviations away from the normal group of employees. In other words, the normal group falls within 70 to 80%, and 1.5 standard deviations is like a small 20% population. So there's one with 400 hours. I would say here's one that has almost 900 hours of overtime in a given year all by themselves. And then there's another one out here that has almost 1,000 hours of overtime in 2016, and it looks like it represents 100 to 110% of the pay of that employee for the year. We would consider those to be irregular.
What departments are those?
This is the sheriff's office. This is the sheriff's office for 2016, so this would represent the deputy force in the sheriff's office. Sir.
So to understand you, you're saying anything between 300 hours is considered reasonable based on your
Yes,
analysis.
Commissioner. We said, well, this population in the orange box is high, but let's draw a line, let's meet halfway and say 300 hours. And anything above 300 hours, we'll look at analytically, and then anything above 400 hours, we'll examine those time cards and see where they, which employees had those types of hours. I have some tables later that I'll show you that collectively show both employees that have over 300 hours in a given year and the same employee which may have over 400 hours in a given year. And it'll become much clearer. So I'm going to do the same scatter plot chart, and I'm going to look at fiscal year 2016, and this represents the Sheriff's Detention Center. So again, on the left-hand side, we have the overtime hours from 0 hours of overtime to 1.2 hours of overtime, and in the lower axis, we have the percentage of overtime pay compared to the employee's regular pay. I'll draw the blue box again. That represents a good amount of the employees in the detention center, the vast majority, less than 200 hours of overtime, and less than 10% of the pay that they earn. I'll draw the orange box again, which will take us up to 400 hours of overtime. There appears to be a broader population in this area. Again, we looked at 300 and over as being high. And then I'll draw the red line again, where we have a population of employees over 400 hours of overtime. But you will notice that in the light shaded gray area underneath, 1.5 standard deviations or outliers seem to be within that range. That could be because those employees have additional duties that they need to do and they're not predictable. We're not sure because we can't get that information from the sheriff's office. But to be consistent, we examined every time card with an employee that had over 400 hours of overtime in a given fiscal year. And so you can see some of these I've circled. There's 600 hours of overtime a year. Here's 700 hours. Here's 900 hours. But there's an employee in the sheriff's office that had 1,200 hours of overtime in 1 year. And I'll just pause there to put that in perspective. A normal full-time equivalent, commissioners, is 2,080 hours a year, or 40 hours a week. We did notice on the sheriff's regular time, that regular time in the sheriff's office on the time card we previously looked at, there's a statement that says overtime will be paid for hours incurred in excess of 86 hours over a 14-day period. So the sheriff's normal regular time hours incurred for regular pay is expected to be about 86 hours versus what you would think would be the normal 40-hour, 2-week period of 80 hours. But this graph normalizes all that because all we've captured are the two elements that are most important. Overtime hours, regardless of what the base was, and the percentage that the overtime pay was in, compared to their regular pay.
So this is 1 year.
Yes, sir.
1 year.
Yes, sir. Once year 2016, as an example. We ran these analytics for every year, for every department within the county and the sheriff, and we have the raw analytics to tell us where the what we would consider to be the outliers. And in this case, we drew a line at 400 hours or greater. We would examine all of those time cards, and I'll have the results of that for you later in this slide presentation.
I'm going to ask this question. You kind of hit on it.
Yes, sir.
If I work 40 hours a week for 52 weeks, the entire year, I work 40 hours a week, how many hours is that?
Well, and, yeah,
2,080. And this individual worked how many overtime hours?
well, actually,
It's 2236.
yeah, so this one are you pointing to, Commissioner?
The top.
Yeah, the top one has almost 1,200 hours of overtime. We'll see exactly what that is in a minute. But if it's a full-time equivalent, as I discussed earlier, 2,080 hours, so we'll just say 2,100 hours to make it easy. This individual worked an extra more than half a year more in the same year. In other words, they would have in excess of 3,300 to 3,400 hours worked in 1 year. And we would consider that, and I think the reasonable person would to be irregular. Clearly an outlier.
Do you know how much that person would have made
Yes, sir, we do. I don't have that in the presentation, but I do have the overtime amount in total for all the employees that we looked at that were above 300 hours and all the employees that we looked at that were above 400 hours in overtime in the given fiscal year. And I'll give you those numbers here shortly. This isn't exact, but we believe this particular, I've been authorized to disclose this by Mr. Charleston. We believe this particular employee that works in the detention center earned that year somewhere in the neighborhood of $80,000.
What's the salary grade?
For, whether it depends on if you're a jail or a courtroom, it's somewhere around $30,000.
You said that later on in the presentation, you're gonna talk about the time cards again, the time sheets.
I am, yes, sir, Commissioner. I'm going to show them my employee by year with the overtime they had in that given year. And I'm going to highlight all the employees that had more than 300 hours in a year. And especially, I'm going to show all the employees that had more than 300 hours in a year. And I'm going to show all the employees, highlight those that had over 400 hours in a year. It'll become more apparent where the excess overtime is and why we focused our efforts on examining those employees. So in summary, we noted there were 74 employees with at least high overtime, that is greater than 300 hours a year. Of those employees, 34 had very high overtime hours, with 400 hours of regular, which we consider irregular, and we'll summarize it in the table below. On the left-hand side, we have the high overtime employees. In the detention center, there was 48 employees that had more than 300 hours in a given year over the 5-year period that we reviewed. There were 24 employees in the sheriff's office that had over 300 hours in a given year in the years that we reviewed. There were 2 employees in the communications department, the operations of the county, that had overtime in excess of 300 hours in the years that we reviewed. On the right-hand side, we classified the very high overtime, which we consider irregular, of 400 hours or more. There were 29 employees in the detention center, 5 employees in the sheriff's office, and no employees in the communications department. Again, we're unable to determine which sheriff's office and detention center employees had legitimate and verifiable overtime during these time periods. We can't do it without the cooperation of the sheriff's department, because part of our procedures would be no different than yours. We would want to talk to the supervisors, the employees, review the justifications, and determine whether or not they were proper.
But regardless of what time sheets we got from the sheriff's office, all these folks have been paid for this time.
Yes, Commissioner. We do recognize, and I want to emphasize this, draw your memory back. We do recognize that some of the elevated or high overtime hours, that's more than 300, less than 400, may be appropriate, authorized, justified, and reasonable given the nature of the workload required by either the sheriff's office or the detention center. It could be. So that's one of the reasons we drew the line kind of at 300 and then made another line at 400. We recommend that the 34 employees noted above, the 29 jailers and the 5 deputies, should have their time sheets thoroughly scrutinized by the district attorney and the SBI to determine if all their very high overtime, excess overtime, was substantially justified and appropriately authorized. Our examination procedures consisted of the following. We examined 1,482 timesheets for the 34 employees in the sheriff's office and detention center with overtime of more than 400 hours a year. Our basic procedures comprised of the following. Please stop me if these don't seem obvious or if you want me to explain the procedures further. Our first procedure was to verify that the original timesheets for the employee selected were contained in the county's records. So in other words, we would expect to see the original timesheet. Conversely, our next step was to determine if the timesheet was a copy, because there shouldn't be any copies of timesheets in the county's possession. There should only be originals. If they were copied or non-original, we would consider that to be an exception and highly irregular. Determine if the timesheet contained in the county's record appears to be altered. Has it been changed? Does it look right? Determine if any of the timesheets are missing. We would not expect to have any missing timesheets. Verify the timesheet appears appropriately authorized. And if you recall from the manual timesheets that I reviewed with you earlier, there's a sheriff's signature stamp, and then there's initials next to that stamp with the employee that applied the signature stamp. Verify the overtime, OT as we shortened it, on the timesheet contains formal documented justification for the overtime. The day's work, the reasons why, as I showed you earlier in the timesheet example.
Did the timesheets have that particular information on?
There were exceptions, Commissioner, and I will go over those exceptions with you and how many timesheets in this particular test that we found exceptions. Right. Yes, sir. Verify the total overtime on the timesheet agrees to the county's system record. In other words, does the time of overtime on the manual timesheet reconcile to the county's system of electronic records, their Munis financial system? Verify the total compensation for the time recorded in the county's financial system for the selected employee agrees to the employee's IRS Form W-2. And I will tell the commissioners that we did our procedures initially on fiscal years. So July 1 to June 30th. As you know, employees are paid on the calendar year, January 1 to December 31st, and therefore the W-2s come out in January typically. So we are still reconciling the time incurred in your records back to the employee W-2 to make sure that they agree. In other words, that the W-2 was not understated for any time or pay that was paid to the employee. If available, we would compare the original timesheet to the copy retained by the sheriff's office to determine if there were any differences or discrepancies between the two. We think that's a critical step. I'm going to show you what the employee overtime looks like by employee for the years that we looked at, from 2012 to 2016. This is the sheriff's office, where overtime in excess of 300 hours is incurred by a deputy per year. These tables will show the 300 hours or anything above that. Any overtime that's less than 300 hours is excluded from the table, so it's easier to pick out what we looked at. So I'm trying to make it easy to look at what we analyzed or examined. The names of these deputies have been masked to protect personal identifiable information of privacy, and because there's an ongoing investigation with the district attorney and the SBI. The deputies with overtime of 400 hours or greater are highlighted in these tables, and the underlying timesheets were selected for examination with procedures I just discussed with you. The table here on the right shows there's 24 deputies, and we masked the name of the deputy to be A through X. The years are across the top. Anything over 300 hours we captured on the table, and we summed the totals of those on the right-hand side of the page. You'll notice that deputy A, B, and C are all highlighted because they had hours in excess of 400. And just as an example, in 2014, deputy C had 578 hours, 473 in 2015, and 415 in 2016. He also had 370 hours in 2013. But we selected the highlighted timesheets supporting these years for examination. You'll notice that this deputy had 989 hours, or almost 1,000 hours in 2016. The deputy B had 919 hours in 2016 and 975 hours in 2015, which we consider to be irregular. There are a couple other deputies that had overtime hours in excess of 400 in 2012, but we didn't have any deputies that had any overtime in excess of 400 in 2013. So visually, you know which employees are getting all the overtime is the purpose of the table, and where we focused our procedures. The next slide will be the Sheriff's Detention Center, overtime in excess of 300 hours by jailer per year. And then again, jailers with overtime in excess of 400 hours are highlighted in these tables. Jailers number 25 through 46, virtually all had overtime in excess of 400 hours in 2016. I will point that out that 2016 seems to be the year where most of the overtime was occurred. 2015, 2014, and I'll just point out a couple. The jailer with almost 1,200 hours, 1,186 hours in 2016, 817 in 2015, and 700 in 2014. But you'll notice there's a jailer down here too that has overtime hours in excess of 400 hours every year, including what looks to be 930 hours in 2014. Again, the highlighted employees' time cards were selected to support that year's overtime and examined based on procedures I described earlier. The Communications Department, overtime hours in excess of 300 hours per year by employee, was 2 employees. Back in 2013 and 2012, we had 2 employees that had over 300 hours a year. We looked at them analytically, but they didn't incur overtime in any subsequent years that we considered high or very high, so therefore we didn't apply any other procedures to those employees. Okay, the results of our examination procedures for there were 34 employees that had time in a given fiscal year of more than 400 hours. We examined almost 1,500 timesheets based on the test that I described earlier. This is the results. We noted 18 exceptions with timesheets that did not appear to be original. And therefore, those 18 timesheets for exceptions appear to be copies that you would not expect to find in the county's records. We noted 6 exceptions with timesheets that appeared to be altered. They were clearly altered. We did not detect any missing timesheets for the employees selected, nor did we expect to. We noted 18 exceptions with timesheets that did not appear to be properly authorized. But I will say this, we are still reviewing authorizations because we have to look at the sheriff's stamp and determine how many times it was applied just by itself with no other initial showing which employee applied it. And if it exceeds a certain number, for example, we wouldn't expect the sheriff to physically timestamp employee timesheets for 400 or 500 employees. That would be very unusual. It would probably be more likely that the employee that applied the stamp did not leave an audit trail with their initials as to who it was. And we would consider that an authorization exception. But without the full cooperation of the sheriff with going through his time cards, it's hard for us to determine that.
So correctly authorized would have a stamp and an initial sign.
We would think that the vast majority of the time cards, given the size of the sheriff's operations, which are approximately 300 employees, 120 in the sheriff's office and 120 approximately in the detention center, are nearly the size of the county that has approximately 300 employees. And for him to physically stamp all those time cards, we would say it would probably be a very small portion of time cards, and probably only his direct reports. Everybody else we would expect would be delegated to apply his signature stamp.
I have a point of clarification as well.
Yes, sir.
I just want to let the public know this is our first time seeing this. You know, we wanted you all to see this at the same time that we saw this. So when we're asking questions, we're not just throwing things out that we already have answers to. But to clarify the copies, that's significant because there should be no copies in our office. Every timesheet here should be original.
Should be its unaltered original, yes.
And my question, those 18 exceptions there, are they all one person or multiple people? Do you know?
My investigators are telling me it's multiple people.
You say all this information has been turned over to the FBI.
No, Commissioner, we have shared our preliminary results with them, and we will work with the district attorney and the SBI to share the details once we've completed all our procedures, quality control checks with the underlying details.
And we had wanted an expansion of the investigation to those 34 sheriff employees, is that correct?
Yes, we did communicate to the SBI and the district attorney that we recommend 34 employees with very high overtime, over 400 hours. Those time cards should be carefully scrutinized, examined, and determined if they are appropriately justified and authorized based on their investigative procedures. And I think they have full access to the sheriff.
And another point of clarification, when we did go to court over time sheets, trying to get the time sheets from the sheriff to possibly justify this stuff, it was reported in the news that the district attorney stated that time sheets were altered and copies were made to change the amount of hours on the copies. That's why this is significant.
It is, and there's another step that's very significant too. So if the time card that's retained by the county is not the original, appears to be a copy, or it has been altered, the question is, what was the root cause? Because it's in the county's possession. So in other words, if those time cards are turned over, reviewed, and entered, was the county employees responsible? What was the root cause for having a copy? Or if we had access to the sheriff's copies of the original timesheets, is there a different timesheet copy maintained by the sheriff's office versus what the county has as the original, which would indicate to us as investigators that the root cause of any disparities between the original copy would likely reside in the sheriff's operations.
Let me ask this question. But all these things that you've revealed so far, could an untrained eye pick up on any of this stuff? Or is this stuff that you would really have to be trained to look at a timesheet to really be able to tell whether it appeared not to be the original, it appeared not to be, it appeared to be a copy, or it had been altered? Is this something that someone's going through there, putting it into the Munis system? Would they recognize that stuff going through this time to you?
Commissioner, I'll just submit this to you. People that process payroll and HR matters do it every day. So they should be intimately familiar with what the legitimate article looks like. So it's actually easier for them to pick up when one is different, because they see the original one all the time. It's not unlike the Secret Service, who doesn't go look at fraudulent currency. They examine and study the original so that the counterfeit pops out immediately in their eyes. So I would say typically what I've found in the years that I've been doing this is that employees who work in HR and payroll are very good at detecting when something's not right. It is their primary role. The next step, I will point out, we found 341 exceptions with timesheets that did not appear to have proper justification for their overtime. We noted 2 exceptions with the timesheets that did not agree to the county system of record, and we have yet to complete those procedures and work backwards through the county and the county manager to determine was that just an error or what happened. I would say, as an accountant and a former controller, that inherently in employee payroll, you have an inherent control. If employees are underpaid, they will let you know. That's right. However, if they are overpaid, unfortunately, employees do not always let you know.
Okay, go back to item F.
Yes, sir.
The 341 exceptions that do not appear to have any type of proper justification. That's all in the sheriff department and the jail.
Yes, because if you'll recall from the tables I showed earlier, Commissioner, all the employees that had overtime in excess of 400 hours in a given fiscal year either worked in the sheriff's department, there were 5, the sheriff's office, or the detention center, where there were 29 employees, collectively 34 employees. Yes, sir.
So these 341, are you saying that those are all from 34 people?
No, those are from various employees where we looked at time cards. Again, we examined close to 1,500 time cards, 1,482 if I remember correctly. And those overtime justifications were spread across that population of time cards. Now, we do have the detailed results in a table next to the employee, so we know exactly what employee had those exceptions. And so that will help visualize. I didn't want to put it on the screen because it's an eye chart. That will help us as we coordinate with the SBI to focus on which employees are likely the higher risk employees for regular overtime. But again, we recommend they examine every one of them. We noted 2 exceptions where the time cards didn't agree with the county system of record. We are still working through that, and we'll work through that with the county manager and her team. We have not yet verified the total compensation of time recorded in the county's financial system on a calendar year against the employee's W-2 because we haven't been able to reconcile the time yet. We focused all our attention on fiscal year overtime to start with. So we're still completing those procedures. And we were unable to compare the sheriff's employee original timesheets to copies maintained by the sheriff's office because they just weren't provided. Some other results, now those were based on our basic procedures, but I do have one more slide that just kind of shows you some of the things that we did note in those exceptions. We noted that certain timesheets where the date of the justification, the overtime justification, did not match the dates on the timesheet. In other words, I'm justifying overtime for dates in my justification box that don't match the dates where I had overtime on the timesheets. We would consider that improper. We noted that on certain timesheets, the same justifications and overtime dates were carried over to multiple timesheets, and in some cases carried over to different years. So in other words, you have the same justification for overtime that's carried over into a different year or a different timesheet. It looks exactly like the justification used the last time. The dates might not even be changed to match the pay period. And in many cases where the justification of overtime simply stated worked overtime with no amplifying explanation, which we would consider, we would challenge that and say, you can't just say I worked overtime, there's got to be a reason for it. We noted 3 different employees in the detention center that appeared to have copied the same justification on their respective timesheets, where the dates of the overtime did not agree to the timesheet dates worked. We noted 1 employee in the detention center that appeared to have worked overtime for 24 out of 27 consecutive days, which we find highly irregular. We noted several instances where the employee, supervisor, sheriff stamp authorization predated the timesheet ending date. So said differently, the time was pre-approved in some cases 4 days in advance, where the employee had not yet worked the time. The date had pre-approved it, and then there was time entered after the authorization date. Overall, it appeared that in 2016, the vast majority of timesheets lacked any justification. And I think you probably saw that on the tables where we had all the highlighted employees that seemed to wait towards 2015 and especially in 2016. And that's the end of our public update.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
What do the county commissioners do to keep this from ever happening again?
That's a great question. I get asked that often. I would tell you that based on my understanding and what caused the initial search warrant, 2 employees apparently, allegedly conspired to circumvent, override your system of internal control. No system of internal control can provide absolute assurance that it can't be overridden or circumvented. So you can never have absolute assurance. You can design your internal control system to provide reasonable assurance based on those 5 elements of the anti-fraud program I shared earlier, that you have effective preventative controls to timely prevent it, or effective detective controls to timely detect it. But you can't make it full force.
Putting everybody on time clock every soon.
I would say that generally speaking, if all the employees are in the same system and the controls are applied in the same manner, that you could conclude that you would have a lower risk of irregular overtime in this case to occur, because you would all be on the same system and be using it consistently. And we do have 2 systems again, this depends. I've seen paper systems that are more effective than electronic systems. So it's only as good as you use the system, and you have control, discipline, and maturity over that time being the system. But yes, in general, I would say, based on my experience as a CPA, a former controller, an accountant, who's been doing this for many years, typically you would want all your employees using the same system or in the same system. But again, you have disparate operations, so that doesn't, one size doesn't always fit all. In general, yes.
Right.
Yes, sir. There's no other questions. That's the end of our update. Here's my question.
What we intend to do going forward in our meetings with the district attorney and the SBI, we are going to try to work in collaboration as best we can. County commissioners gave us instruction early on to be transparent and to try to get this work done. And so we made it clear to the district attorney that we intend to work in a collaborative way, and we have. And I think that the district attorney has indicated and published statements that the county has been cooperative, and we've been carrying out what you've asked us to do. I might point out that early on in the process, discussion was had with the district attorney. We wanted to tone this thing down a little bit. I want to commend each of the members of the Board of County Commissioners for adhering to that. I asked you, each of you personally, not to make comments in the newspaper or in other places because of an ongoing investigation. And to the extent that the County Commission has been quiet, it's been because we specifically requested you to do so. Now,
Are y'all gonna ask the sheriff to do the same thing?
you should direct that to Ryan Mitchell.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if I can have the floor, I would, first of all, like to thank Cherry Becker, particularly Mr. McKay, Mr. Pounds, and Mr. East, and your staff for doing an outstanding job. I mean, outstanding job. Like Commissioner Thomas said, it's the first time we've seen all this information. The first time, actually, the DA and the SBI, you guys, excuse me, have seen before we have. So the cloud that I talked about earlier was, you know, some statements previously made by our sheriff that was kind of libelous, slanderous to this entire board. And so this cloud has been over our head for a long time. I hope this report help bring the truth and help it come back to the forefront. Again, I thank you all for your job.
I'll remind the Board of County Commissioners that you have fiscal oversight. And I think that this board adopts budgets. It's your responsibility to exercise control over those budgets and make sure they're managed appropriately. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about the respective roles of the sheriff, and that's statutory. But the county commissioners have a responsibility too. And so, and I think you can exercise that with respect to managing and seeking justification and making sure that these types of internal control breaches are managed by managing your fiscal oversight over the sheriff.
I have a comment. We've been quiet for so long, I think it's time for some things to we knew what the search warrant said. The search warrant made it very clear what they were coming here for. It was about overtime and timesheets. Somewhere down the line, people began to use their imaginations and their fantasies to fill in voids of what they hoped this investigation was about. There are people who hoped and prayed that this investigation was about us, absent of any fact pointing at such. I serve the people on this board. I serve the people of this community. I make about $10,000 a year. You know, it's time for this stuff to come out. I've been quiet too long. They didn't know me. My son, who's 7, had a baseball game today. His third game, he struck out every game up to now. I got a text message that he got his first hit of the year today. And I miss serving you. I miss serving you. And to know that we allowed these imaginations to come about, it hurts. So I just want to make it clear that no one is trying to intimidate the sheriff. No one is trying to make him look like a bad guy. I want to make it clear as a county commissioner, nobody is going to steal from us. I don't care who you are, and I don't care who you work for, you're not going to steal from this county. And we're going to make sure that everybody who is stolen from this county is going to come to justice. Those people who were outlined in the red, they were not under FBI investigation. They will be now because of this report. We're not saying that they did anything wrong, but we want to know. If you didn't find anything suspicious about looking at that report, I would say you weren't paying attention. We want to know if those individuals took money unlawfully from the county. Simple as that. We worked all avenues to try to find this information through diplomatic channels. So now it's time for the district attorney and the SBI to do their job. I will compliment the district attorney for working with us. And I do believe that she will do what's right. End of my statement.
Thank you. Any more statements from the board? You all will stick around for closed session?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Thank you. Let's get some of this other stuff out of the way. Very quick. Thank each of you for staying with us as long as you did. Consent A through H in the board for having any concern. Make a motion. We approve this. More seconds.
Second.
All in favor with aye. Aye. Those that have it. Staff induction, tax collector. So service board, get ready.
Good evening, Mr. Commissioner.
Good evening.
Total collected for the month of April current year was $214,221.61 at a 94.75% collection rate compared to a 94.28% rate last year. Prior year's collected was $86,163.43 at a 32.33% rate compared to a 42.15% rate last year. Total collected for the month of April was $300,385.04.
Thank you, Ms. Dan. Good job. Look at the social service, board appointment. Someone here with social service? Ms. Charlotte Kelly. Charlotte Kelly. Shirley.
Come on up, Ms. Wright.
Carl Hayden is the Social Services Chairman, and of course, Ms. Charlotte Haley, in fact, is our Vice Chairman. And Carl called me this afternoon to say he could not be here. So I'm here to say that I would recommend you reappointing, I think it's 5-1, 5-9, anonymously for a second term.
Thank you.
So we have to support that.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas, your board. What I hear.
Don't make it pretty short, I'm gonna make it.
You have to.
I make a motion.
Where's the second report, Ms. Charlotte Kelly? Ms. Kelly willing to serve.
And there's the second.
All in favor with aye?
Aye.
Be reappointed. Thank you.
Thank you for your service. Thank you.
Thank you. Park and Recreation, Kendrick Maynard. This is A, we table B.
All right, good evening.
Good evening.
Members of the board. We're here for appointment, Mr. Kenny Pricing, to the vacancy of Parks and Rec Advisory Board.
Okay. Stand.
Stand.
Right, stand up. Okay, good.
Yes, I just
Willing to
mentioned
serve.
that appreciate the opportunity to serve on this board, lifelong member of Polk County. Worked with several parks and rec directors throughout the years, from RSA all the way up to Elgin, and now the opportunity to work with Kim.
Thank you.
I think that the county is very aggressive in what they're doing in parks and rec. I like to have the opportunity to step in and help.
Thank you. We have a motion to appoint tonight? Motion. Second, all had time to sit off it with I. Thank you so much, you for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all, so that's include A, we table B, so Ms. Williams, surplus property.
The process of advertising
Mhm.
of cemeteries, 369 Indian Lane,
Mhm.
and another parcel off Indian Lane.
Okay,
We have offers on those that do comply with our rules as far as they need to be at least the amount of taxes due.
do I have motion to approve A and B?
Mr. Chairman, I make that motion.
The second. Motion second, group A and B, all had time to sit off it with I. Vote. I have Ms. Nancy Ronda.
Good evening, Chairman.
Good evening.
On my agenda, I have the 5307 agreement with the city of Fayetteville.
Mhm.
It's a grant that we share with, the city of Fayetteville has, that they have to give us a portion being we're urbanized area.
Okay,
And for 15-16, it's 50,000 and 90,000 for 16-17, which is a total of 140,000. And we have to spend 140, it's a match of 50-50.
okay.
So I just like y'all to approve so we can get our money.
We need a minute now.
Yes, sir.
There, her motion approved? That's A and B?
Second.
You need A, and you talk about A and B next?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that motion second group A and B, all had time to consider, all in favor with I. Opposed, I have, thank you, Nancy. Thank you for staying and waiting on that. Item number 9, which one we got now?
The one I added, the splash pad, I showed you.
Jesus special.
Yes.
Let's do it, go ahead, quickly, y'all got about 2 minutes. Good evening.
As a proclamation for the Hope County Parks and Rec, Hope County School Splash Pad Week. Whereas play is crucial factor in the well-being of children. Children who play outdoors are healthier, suffer less obesity and obesity-related problems such as diabetes and heart disease. And whereas Hope County leaders believe strongly in providing safe and enjoyable activities for the children of Hope County, and whereas Hope County constructed a splash pad to allow the children of Hope County to enjoy playing in the water without standing water. And whereas this splash pad is the first in Hope County that is designed as a safe way for the children to have some fun in the sun. And now, therefore, the Hope County Board of Commissioners and Hope County Schools are partnering to open the splash pad during the week of June 5th through June 8th, 2017, to the county's elementary schools to celebrate the students' hard work at the end of the school year.
Okay, there are motion approved. The motion is second. All have time to sit off it with I. Opposed? I have, thank you. Yes, sir.
Citizens in Hope County, we've been sitting here for a long time. May 20th at 10 a.m., your splash pad on the school level will be having a grand opening. Come down and cool out and enjoy.
Brad, no cost, you can come in and still, nobody. All right, as we move on tonight, we have a very special moment here tonight. We glad to have with us tonight Mrs. Jean Powell and Ms. Ellen McNeil. Thank y'all for coming. Thank y'all. Y'all look good sitting over there. Both have served as county commissioners and have done a real good job. This is the first splash pad of Hope County. It's a start. The first, which makes history. Y'all know that, don't you? And tonight, we have asked the board to do a resolution and to name this first splash pad Jean Powell and Ellen McNeil. Please come up. Please come up.
I have to get
Thank The new flash pad at 211 Sport Complex, Element Neal, and G. Powell.
Read, Chairman. The resolution dedicating the new splash pads at the 211 Sports Complex to Ms. Ella McNeil and Ms. Jean Powell. Whereas Ms. Ella McNeil served on the Board of Commissioners from 2006 to 2014. Whereas Ms. Jean Powell served on the Board of Commissioners from 2002 to 2014. Whereas both Ms. McNeil and Ms. Powell led the county during a period of extraordinary growth and worked tirelessly to further the interests of the whole county and its citizens. During their tenure on the Board of Commissioners, the county constructed 2 elementary schools, a Sandy Grove Middle School, which is the nation's first energy positive public school, a wastewater plant, a new jail, and numerous other capital projects. And whereas in 2016, the county constructed a splash pad at the 211 Sports Complex. Whereas the splash pad was one of the Ms. McNeil's and Ms. Powell's visions for the children of the community. Now therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Commissioners of Hope County wish to express their deep gratitude for Ms. McNeil and Ms. Powell's leadership and dedication to the citizens of Hope County by dedicating the Hope County first splash pad in honor of Ms. McNeil and Ms. Jean Powell. Adopted the 15th day of May 2017, James Leach, Chairman, Harry Sutherland, Vice Chair, Tony Hunt, Commissioner, Robert Wright, Commissioner, Alan Thomas, Commissioner, attested by Gwen McGugan, Clerk to the Board. Congratulations.
Dedication of the splash pad. Let us invite you to come down. When Tish?
May 20th.
This Saturday.
This Saturday
At 10 a.m.
at 10 a.m. Please bring, refreshment be served. Please bring the children, parents. Let us all go down and open this splash pad. Let's do it in good style.
Congratulations.
I'd like to take a minute to say a few kind words to these two ladies. You know, in my lifetime, I've had 4 women to tell me what to do. One my mother, one my wife back in the back, and these are the other. They all have been very disciplined and lead me the right way, and I'd like to say thank you to them.
I'd like to just say that it was a pleasure serving with Jean and Miss Helen. You know, as Bobby said, they carried a heavy stick on this board, and you know, we really appreciate all the hard work that they've done. And they really did a lot of projects, as Harry named out, that were really expensive projects. The Sandy Grove Middle School, the wastewater treatment plant, all of that funding came during their being on the board and serving. And I want to say this about Sandy Grove Middle School. When we were having to build the middle school and all the projections were laid out, financial analysis were laid out, it come obvious to us that we had to raise taxes 3 cents or we couldn't build the school. Well, James looked at me and Bobby and said, you're going to have to find 3 votes somewhere else because we ain't raising taxes. I don't know that they've ever raised taxes themselves. But I tell you what, when I sat down and talked to these 2 ladies, and the more we thought about it, the more we looked at it, we all went out on a limb together on a project that was the first of its kind. And without their votes, we would have never had that school. So don't let James and Bobby get any credit for that school, because these 2 ladies here stood up and voted to increase those taxes. And we never had a grumbling word from anybody, because that school, I was out there tonight for a banquet, and I'm telling you, it's one of the best projects that we've had. And without these two ladies, we couldn't have made it happen. Ladies, thank you, and I respect you.
These two ladies did convince us, Bobby, that we had to vote on this tax increase. Ms. Edison and James, you know, two wrong don't make one right.
Well, sometimes they listen, but we kept trying. Thank y'all so much. We really appreciate it. And it's kind of fun, really, to have a splash party and after you. So I hope everybody enjoys it, the children especially. Summer's coming, so be cool. Come join us at the splash pad.
I'm really, it's not often that I'm speechless, but I am tonight. I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. God bless each and every one of you.
Thank you. Okay, thank y'all. 5 more minutes.
Chairman,
5 more minutes.
I make a motion that we approve the resolution that we just presented to former Commissioner King Powell and former Commissioner Billy McKay.
The second. Motion is second. All right, time to sit off. Aye, opposed? I have it. Thank you. Okay, I have 10B. Ms.
Ms. Bolter.
Ms. Bolter. I heard motion tonight to add Ms. Bolter. We wanted to. Yeah, we got it on you already. All right, Ms. Bolter, you got about 3 minutes to tell what you need to.
Well, I thank you for being here tonight and listening to me
Thank you.
tonight. We're having issues with the sheriff's department in our neighborhood. We need to get to the mic.
They said they can't hear you.
We can call them.
Pull it to you. There you go.
We call the sheriff's department when there's issues in the neighborhood. When we see people up on people's porches looking in their windows, see them trying to break into cars, seeing them throw the stolen stuff out of their bags on the corner, we call. I call them, they give us stupid answers. They tell us, we didn't see it, there's nothing we can do. My son has been pulled out in the street and beat by 7 people with a baseball bat. And they do nothing. They just stand and tell us that we're racist, that we caused the problem. But it all comes to my yard. We're not going anywhere else. My daughter just got jumped by 2 gentlemen jumping out of a car with her 5-month-old baby, just walking him in the neighborhood. We had an officer come to our house when somebody was trying to break into my neighbor's car. She told my neighbor that we were racist not to associate with us. We've had officers tell us that they will take their time coming to my house. The house across the street, a school teacher moved out of. The man's wife had surgery. He's been trying to re-rent it. He asked us to watch the house. So we do this. We called them when their side door got busted open. The officers tell us that their house didn't get broke into. The wind blew their door open. And this has been going on for a while. In August of last year, that's when they had them driving through the streets at 4 in the morning, shooting up the houses. I was standing on my porch watching this go on, calling 911. They caught the driver of the car. I told them who the 3 were doing the shooting. They didn't notify 1 person in the neighborhood, and they still tried to blame it on me like I had done something. The only thing I've done is try to look out for that neighborhood. Try to look out for my neighbors. That's what a community is supposed to do. I've had officers telling me that we aren't to look out for our neighbors. We are to mind our own business. I'm asking for some help. These are all kids that think they're in a gang that do this. We've taken videos. They still won't do anything. So I'm asking if you can all help us. We don't know what else to do.
If you want to comment, we take information, or we don't usually respond. What action, the information is up here.
If they could put some curfew out there, if the officers would actually make it there in a timely manner. if they would actually do their job when they came out. My daughter was in my front yard and some boy come in and pulled a knife on her. She told him where he lived, but they allowed him to make a complaint on her and not her to make one on him. But he came to my yard and pulled a knife on her. I'm just asking for some help.
Ms. Bolger, can you make sure that the clerk gets your information,
Yes, sir.
so that we can follow up?
Yes,
We
sir.
need to do that.
And I told Mr. Leach before the meeting tonight that in the last 5 years, I've probably called the sheriff's department over 200 times. And it's always legitimate. They killed one of my dogs. I even showed him how the guy next door was robbing houses and filling up his back classroom. And every 3 months, they'd come move a room up there like somebody was moving, but nobody ever moves. Nobody listens to us.
Have you met with the sheriff?
I've met with Deputy Chief Hammond a few times and filed complaints with him. But Mr. Peterkin is usually too busy or in meetings, or he's hard to get a hold of.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Can I add something to that?
Please quickly.
I just bought a house where she lives at. My husband works third shift. I do concealed carry. I have 3 daughters. It is to the point where we can't walk in our neighborhood because youngins are going to try to attack our kids.
You call 911?
You know what they tell me? They're underage. We can't do nothing. It is to the point where my daughter stands over. They throw rocks at her. She is fixed to be 13. She weighs 60 pounds. What she can get is 2 boys that look like they're adults. They tell me, oh, we didn't see nothing. They're underage. Nothing can be done. I was laying in my bed, and she called me and told me that there were 2 boys in my driveway fixing to break into my husband's truck. The cop come out there. We seen them. Told her exactly where they went. She said, don't associate with these people. She said they're racist. She said I'll patrol the area. That's what we get every time they come out is we'll patrol. But yet nothing's being done. My kids can't go in the front yard because kids 12, 13, 15 walking through there dropping words that I don't even say, and I'm 30. And I just moved into this. We bought our house in February. And I'm ready to break my contract because it is so bad.
Thank you. You leave your address, Ms. Bowles?
Yes, let me get that. You got it? Okay.
Thank y'all for coming. Thanks so much.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Ms. Tisch, manager report.
The Utilities Committee decided on our wastewater plant opening on June the 6th of 2017. That will start at roughly around 10 o'clock, am I correct? And I will have my recommended budget to the board by next Thursday, which is May 25th.
You must look at the statute and know that date right on.
I have to have it to you by the 1st, but with everything going on, I will have it to you. Garvin and I
Long
will
you
get
look.
it together. We'll have it to you by next Thursday, so y'all have a chance. to
You
look
look at your time. You don't time. You look. Okay. You look at you don't time.
And again, our splash pad on Saturday, that's our big event this week, okay?
And let us get everybody, each of you to come and enjoy it with us as we open the first splash pad. Come and eat with us and let us enjoy the children. 10 o'clock on 211 Farm, correct?
Yes.
All right, if nothing else claim my attention, we're going to have to go to a closed session. Mr. Thomas, you got the statute.
I make a motion to go into closed session for the purpose of, so that the attorney retained by the board to preserve attorney-client privilege pursuant to General Statute 143, 318,
I hear motion. Motion was on closed session. Second. Motion second. Let's get motion second. All right, time to sit on. Ready with aye. Aye. Hold the head. Closed session. Take a 5-minute break.
second.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we recess, this meeting until, Monday, the 22nd of May. Is Monday the 22nd? Today's the 15th, 7 days. It's got to be the 22nd. To the 22nd of May at 1 o'clock.
Second, give the reason.
And the reason is for interviews, for potential department heads.
Second. Motion is second. We had a motion, all have to sit off with aye. Opposed, recess.
Y'all have a good night. All right. Basketball game on.